everyone, and welcome to our Microsoft Build session today on how to become a software developer. Thank you all so much for being here. It's really great to have you in our audience. We're going to be answering all kinds of questions today on how you can make your career as a software developer and the things you need to know to get there. We have a great panel for you today of people from different backgrounds who are going to talk about how they got to their current positions and what they needed to know along the way. My name is Navia. I'm a technical program manager here at Microsoft in our Worldwide Learning org. Prior to that, I had over a decade of experience as a software engineer and also some experience teaching at both the high school level and the coding bootcamp level, teaching programming to people who wanted to pursue this as a career. So I have lots of helpful tips on how to make your way in this industry, and hopefully I can help answer some questions. We also have today Evos Santos, who's a principal software engineering manager. He is going to tell you a little bit about himself in a second. And we also have Dolapo Martins, who is currently a software engineer here at Microsoft. So Evo, welcome to our panel. Thank you so much for being here today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do now, as well as how you got here?
Yeah, sure. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you are watching us. So I'm engineering manager at the Microsoft AI platform team, working on cognitive services, AI applications, and infrastructure to train models at large scale. I've been with Microsoft for 12 years. So I'm originally from Brazil. Did all my studies there with a period during the PhD. I've been in Germany as well, so I have some good international experience, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you today.
Thank you, Evo. We're really excited to have you. Dolapo, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do now and how you got here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dolapo. I currently work at Microsoft, like Navia said, as a software engineer. I currently support Intune, which is enterprise software to help protect corporate data. And before coming to Microsoft, I was just a regular college student, interned a couple places, and now I'm here.
Awesome. So I want to hear a little bit about your journeys to get here. What first got you interested in programming and software engineering? And is it what you imagined that it would be at that time when you first thought of it? Dolapo, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I got started programming really in about middle school. My middle school had a class on how to design your own web page in HTML, CSS. And ever since, my high school also had a science and technology program where I got to work on a robot and things of that nature. Went to college and studied, computer science as well. And my journey's been pretty linear in that way.
Very cool. Is what you do now what you thought you were going to be doing back then?
Honestly, yes, but no. I think the only caveat that I would add to is I have a lot more meetings now. People sometimes think that engineering is a very solitary or within engineering teams kind of role, but I talk to many different people, a couple different times during the week.
Definitely, yeah. I think there is an old myth about the basement dwelling computer scientist who didn't talk to anyone, but it's definitely a very collaborative role. Evo, how about you? How did you get here?
Well, my history with computers starts long ago. So when I was 9 years old, I had my first contact with programming. And maybe for the newer generations that may sound a little bit old, like I have a 5-year-old son who is already playing the iPhone, iPad, right? But a while ago, that was not the case. So my first programming language was actually a language called Logo. So some of you may know a little turtle that you have to send commands to design geometry figures in the screen, and you learn basic principles like loops and things like that. So I was very, very lucky to be on a school in Brazil which had access to computers at that time. So that was the end of the 80s, early 90s. And then during my teenage years, that was the time where we still didn't have an opportunity to download things. There was no internet or not accessible to everyone. So the way you would have new games in your computer, you would go to a newsstand, you would buy a magazine, and then you would be copying the code. And then after a couple of hours, you had written your own game or copied your own game right from the magazine, and you'd be playing in the computer. So that's how my journey with programming started. And then, of course, I did the academic studies, undergrad, master's, PhD, but that was like adult life. So.
Very cool. So it sounds like both of you had an early introduction to programming and kind of fell in love with it a little bit. I had a little bit of a different introduction. I was very lucky to have parents that worked in the tech industry, and that was great exposure for me at an early age, but maybe counterintuitively, at first it made me really not want to pursue a tech career. And I actually thought when I was in high school that I was going to be a Broadway star. So things have changed a little bit, obviously. I took my first programming class in late high school, and I just kind of fell in love with it. I realized that I really enjoy logical thinking and problem solving, and then I reluctantly told my parents that I was indeed going to pursue a degree in computer science, and they were ecstatic about it. So, you know, all different ways to get here, but I think what I want to know from both of you is, what is your advice to the people on the call? What is the first thing they need to learn in order to be able to become a software developer? Evo, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So basically, the number one thing is focus on the fundamentals, right? Make sure you understand algorithms very well, you understand data structures, you know how to analyze them, right? There are lots and lots of things that are coming up as new technologies almost every day, every week, right? As you know, but the fundamentals, they've been pretty consistent, I would say, over the past 30, 40 years in computer science. Right? They haven't changed. So the first thing is really focus on the fundamentals, be it if you are a self-learner or if you're doing your academic studies. That's, I would say, 80 to 90% of what really matters to build a solid career. Because all of you are smart people, you can learn new programming languages, you can learn new things as you grow, but if you don't have the fundamentals, all of that is going to be a very shallow surface, and then you will not be successful, I would say.
Definitely. Do you have a language that you recommend that people start out on?
Well, a couple of them, because different languages, they make you exercise different skills. So you could, of course, start with a language like C, C++, to exercise more of the fundamental principles of memory management, right? You don't have to be a pro on this, but understand how it works, understand how the computer works, and in order to do that, you have to be a little bit lower level. And then try some object orientation language like Java, C#, and of course, for those of you interested in machine learning, in data science, and in the more popular topics of today, Python is really a great language for you to learn. So.
Awesome. Those are some great recommendations. Dolapo, what did you start out learning, and then what do you use now?
Honestly, so language-wise, I did start out with with C, and now I work in C#. So I went from C to C++ to Java to C#, with a couple of different languages sprinkled in between, but those are like the main ones in my progression. To the earlier conversation, though, about fundamentals, I would really just add something that I think is a little bit, it's a fundamental, but it's almost like a basic, which is like your logic tables. So your truth tables are ironically something that really helped me. Like when I first started learning how to program, I started with, parsing out my if statements, like what does this mean in logical form? And so that's the thing that you can do to kind of get a little bit more familiar with the Boolean logic that's going on. And then honestly, the loops. Those are like the two things that I think are like just the bare basic. Start with this, get a handle on that for sure.
Definitely. I think, from my experience teaching, especially at a boot camp, I would say a lot of people right now tend to jump straight to web development and learning about, how to build web applications. And that's great. It's really great to be able to do that. And I think it's a great place to start because you are able to build projects on your own really quickly. But definitely don't forget about what Evo and Dolapo just said about, those fundamentals of the truth tables and the lower level, what is going on inside the computer, because things like memory management and logic, they will come up at some point, either on an interview or in your career. So even if you do a little research on your own and explore those are really important not to forget, just because you're working at a higher level. So I want to dig a little deeper into these fundamentals that you're talking about, and I want to talk a little bit about what you look for on a resume. A lot of these things are things that are very well known to be part of the CS degree. Most computer science degree programs focus pretty heavily on data structures and algorithms and things like that. Is that required? Do you think that people have to get a CS degree in order to do this, or what else do you look for on a resume that tells you that somebody has those skills? Evo, since you're a hiring manager, I'll pose this question to you.
Well, that's a great question. So it's not necessarily required, right? Of course, when we're looking at resumes, we look at what background, what academic background the person has, maybe any previous work experience, and from that we can make some initial conclusions. But there are lots of self-learners out there that maybe did a academic degree in computer science. I know people who studied arts and other disciplines ended up being great software developers as they evolve in their careers. So, but we'll be looking indeed into signals that the person has experience with fundamentals, with programming, with developing software, and of course, depending on the stage in the career, the level of expertise would be different, right?
Definitely. Do you have advice for what somebody can do, if they are a self-learner, if they're going one of these alternate routes like a boot camp or an associate's degree or something like that? What can they do in order to get that experience?
So, well, there are lots of material online that you can have access today. Lots of courses, even from universities, right, where you can try that online. Do self-projects on GitHub, right? Try to build something in an area that you like, right? If you're passionate about games, try to build a game. If you're passionate about business, try to build a component that serves a business application. Find something, a scenario that you're passionate about, and then use that as a channeling or a motivation for you to go very deep in software development. So.
That's definitely great advice. And I think it's a lot easier to build a project on your own if you actually care about the end result, right? If you're working on something that you like and that you're passionate about.
Right.
Delapo, I know you did a lot of internships on your route to your current role. How did that help you, and how did you get those internships?
So I definitely think the internships were helpful in the sense of like getting to work in the environment as a software engineer. School projects are a lot different from when you're actually working, just day to day. School projects tend to be a lot more neatly defined for you. Whereas when you're working, it's, take the initiative, right? So I think that they're helpful just to build that muscle and get acclimated to the work environment. I also think that, with respect to the job search, it always does help to have like demonstrated work experience on your resume. So yeah, internships are beneficial. With respect to like my sort of process, I honestly think that the most important internship you're going to have is your very first internship, because I think that internship just opens the door to a lot more, right? Once you've demonstrated, hey, I've done this before, it's easier for people to like take that chance on you because they've already seen someone else took it. So I think, for me, I went to like job fairs on my campus. Those were helpful just to get my face, to recruiters. But honestly, the most instrumental part for me in my like career journey was going to conferences, making sure like my resumes were uploaded to conference databases. So even companies that I didn't talk to could actually like pull from the conference database, find my resume. But also just going to network and getting to know people, because, you might not intern with this company this cycle, but the next cycle you've connected with the recruiter or with an engineer on a team, and they will reach out. Like I do reach out to people and say, hey, like, give me an update on, where you are right now.
Absolutely. And it's really great to hear that you had a positive experience with that. I know a lot of people feel like when they attend these big conferences or some of these networking events, like they're just putting their resume out into the void and they're never going to hear anything about it. But it sounds like, when you're proactive about it, when you follow up with those people and get to know them a little bit, it really does work. So those are great opportunities.
I guess what I would like add as a clarification is like I don't lead with my resume at networking events. It's almost like guaranteed that, we're there to like exchange, contact and context. But I do encourage sort of like leading with you as a person first, because I will get your resume from you at some point in the conversation, or I will ask for it, but I want to get to know you as a person, as an engineer. And resume is a little bit more formal in presentation versus who you are in person.
Absolutely. I'll tell a little story that might highlight that. When I was in college, I attended a lot of conferences. I was a member of my school's chapter of the Society of Women Engineers, and they used to host all these awesome networking events for us. And I would always go to these events, and I would put my resume in the big stack of resumes, and I would talk to a few people. Some of them were dinners. And one time I remember I was sitting at a dinner with a table full of students and a recruiter. And I was sitting there being like, I don't think this recruiter is going to reach out to me. I've never heard back from anyone before. And the student sitting next to me basically found out that she had been in the same sorority as this recruiter, and they were doing their secret sorority handshake. And I knew in that moment that this person was going to be the one that the recruiter remembered after the event. And that was actually what mattered. It wasn't the fact that I was there with my resume or that I put it in that big pile of resumes. You actually want to make an impression at these events, and you don't have to, have something lucky happen like be in the same sorority. You can find something to connect with on somebody, and once you start doing that, these networking events will be a lot more productive. I want to switch tacks a little bit and talk a little bit about interviewing, because I know that's something that a lot of people are really scared of, especially technical interviewing. So I want to ask both of you, actually, what is your favorite topic to ask somebody technical interview questions on? And Eva, we'll start with you.
Well, that's a very good question. So it depends on the level of the person. If it's a junior person, somebody coming out of college, versus a more advanced in career engineer. But in general, I love to probe multi-threading and concurrency. And the reason, yeah, it's a more advanced topic. So if the person is more early in career, that comes towards the end of the interview. So I start with some fundamental data structures, algorithms, and things like that. Always a real world problem. So no trivia, no things like that. We always try to simulate a meeting at work, right? So we have a problem. How would you tackle that? How would you design? What's the complexity? How would you test that, right? And then I throw in the multi-threading concurrency problem. And the reason for that is because I work in cloud computing, right? So distributed systems. And that's one thing that we always have to worry about. You have thousands of hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of clients accessing a service. So you have to make that service robust. And it's something that it's very nice to exercise logic and access control and things like that. So that's my favorite one.
Definitely. And actually, that's a great point, Eva, that you are asking questions that are relevant to the area that your team works on. And I think that's something that people don't always think about when they're interviewing for a team. Like, what does that team do, and what should I brush up on that might be relevant to them? Delapo, how about you? What do you like to ask in an interview?
So I will say, like, for me, when I'm interviewing someone, I do actually focus a little bit more on just design, like system design. How did you like structure your code, your like way of thinking through the process? But I actually asked a question, which was a question that stumped me up when I was interviewing, and I thought it was a really good question. And it's honestly just a question about a data structure. It's a try. And ever since, like, that data structure is stuck in my head because it is sort of intuitive when you think about it, but actually designing it is not the most straightforward data structure to design. And you can start a little bit, simpler and build your way up. And then also to, Evo's point, complexity, like how do you time box your code, I think is so important because, day to day, like you have to be mindful of like how much load am I adding, how much latency, like what is the cost of my code. And so just being mindful of the complexity, I think is really, really, really important. And so I tend to focus on those two things.
You both are pretty tough interviewers, I think. If I went into an interview right now and you asked me about tries or multi-threading, I would walk out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd walk out probably on Evo's interview because he said multi-threading and concurrency, and I was like, wait a minute, but
I tried to make
actually,
it fun though.
yeah, that's actually a really good point, though, is that, I think what a lot of people forget is that you don't necessarily have to know the answer to the question or get it 100% correctly. I mean, Delapo, you just mentioned, that was a question that tripped you up in an interview. And we all get questions all the time that we don't know how to answer. It's really about how you break it down and how you think about the problem, more than whether you arrive at the correct solution in the end. I think my favorite questions to ask are like object-oriented design questions. I really like, really broad questions like design an airport or design a library or something like that, something real world. And I like to ask it really broad like that because I want to see how many follow-up questions the interviewee asks me. I'm a program manager, so a lot of what I do is get more details about something from the business side, and I love to see a developer that asks those questions and really thinks about what the customer wants. So that's kind of my usual interview strategy. So Evo, you mentioned that you work on a team that works on cloud-based technology, and I want to talk a little bit about certifications because they've become really, really prevalent now. So you have, a lot of cloud-based certifications specifically, like you can get certified on Azure, you can get certified on AWS, whatever it is. How important are those?
So they're not must-haves, I would say, but they can be the differentiator if you're looking at two resumes, right? And person has similar background, similar experience, but one is certified on some Azure technology, that is a plus, because that shows that the person has dedicated time to study that technology. So
Definitely. And I will mention here, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the chat and you'll get some access to some resources, but there is an offer right now for all students. If you do want to get certified, if you go to Microsoft Learn, which is learn.microsoft.com, and again, you'll get this link in your chat, you will actually currently be able to take a certification exam for $15. Usually they cost $200, so this is a really great opportunity right now. So if you are looking for certifications, that's a great place to both train for those certifications because you get your learning paths and you can basically get all the content you need to get certified. And then you can also take the certification exam. So that's a really great opportunity if you're looking for something to set your resume apart a little bit. So, all three of us are in very different roles. Delapo, you're a software engineer. Evo, you are a software engineering manager, and myself, I'm a technical program manager. So obviously we're doing very different things in our day-to-day roles. And I want to talk about one, what we do in our day-to-day roles, and two, if you do pursue becoming a software developer, if you learn how to program, if you learn computer science, do you have to be a software developer or are there other options available to you? So Delapo, I'll start with you because I think, you are a software developer, so maybe that's the most straightforward question, but what does your day-to-day look like? What do you do every day? And, I just, what is a day in your life?
So a day in my life is actually pretty straightforward. I have a balance of meetings with like my team, just status update meetings, and with my PMs on just the progress of a feature that I'm working on. Are we on time to, ship it out? And then in between that, I'm really just hunched over my computer writing code. Now, every once in a while, like I have some, extra events. So, we might have like a corporate, talk, or we might have like a diversity inclusion event. But for the most part, it really is just like chatting with my team, chatting with my PM, and writing code.
Well, and do you think that you're going to stay a software developer? Like, is that the track you want to continue on?
Oh, I bet my managers is watching this. Yeah, so
no pressure.
right, I am a little bit torn. So prior to starting at Microsoft, my original intent was to just get my PhD and be in academia for quite some time. And so I'm in my master's program now, and every once in a while I do get like that itch to go back into academia and maybe teach for some time. But I don't see myself in industry being anything but a software, engineer for sure.
Very cool. And it's great that that is an option, because you can really continue down the software engineering path as long as you want to. There are so many basically career advances you can make in that role, all the way to being a VP of engineering if you want to. But yeah, it's a really great trajectory. Evo, how about you? You're an engineering manager now. What do you do every day?
So what I do every day today, it's probably different than what I was doing when I was an IC or a software developer, not a manager. So I have to attend lots of meetings, probably even more than the LAPO, right? So I have to meet with my employees, that we have project meetings. But I also do a lot of individual work still as well. So we try to be here at Microsoft very hands-on. So I still write code, I still comment on code reviews, but way less than if I would not be a manager. So I always try to keep my technical skills brushed up, and do lots of architectural discussions, work with my team and with other teams on technical issues. So it's a very technical, hands-on position, but yes, there is a people management side of it is also very important.
Very cool. And it's great to hear that you still get to code every day. Well, maybe not every day, but
Not every day, but at least
yeah.
once a week I'm touching some.
That's awesome. And I know a lot of people will be really happy to hear that, because, there is a perception that if you get away from a software engineering role, you might not get to code anymore. Evo, what kind of person do you think makes a good engineering manager?
Oh, that's a very good question. There may be not a single profile, but there's some skills which I would be required. Liking to deal with people, right? Being interested in seeing others develop their careers. At Microsoft, we have this framework of model, coach, and care for managers. So we have to, as managers, we have to be role models. We have to be willing to coach the employees in different challenges that may have. Sometimes they're technical challenges. Sometimes they're just people relationship challenges with other folks in the team, outside the team. And we have to care, right? Care about their work and care about their life as well, right? So you have to have that mix of being good at what you do technically, but also being good and passionate about leading with people.
Absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit about my role as a technical program manager. So essentially what I do is act as a liaison between our business teams and our technical engineering teams. So I gather a lot of business style requirements that may not be designed to be technical requirements. And I essentially translate those for our engineering teams into what are the tooling needs. And it's a little bit more high level, it's a little bit more complex than just acting as a translator. Like, you do have to do a lot of design thinking yourself and think about what might be the best solutions for the business problems you're facing. But I find it to be a really exciting role. And you do, I find, kind of need to have a technical mindset to do it. Not every program manager codes. Some of them do. I personally do not write code. Well, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes I do just because I like it, but not because it's required by my role. But there are roles as a PM, as a technical PM, where you will have to write code. So it kind of varies per team and what they're working on. But you do kind of have to have that problem-solving mindset, and you do have to be able to talk to engineers on a technical level. So you do kind of need to understand the engineering life cycle, how to get a product out there. And it really helps if you have some experience doing that. So I would say, asking myself the same question, what makes a good technical program manager? Definitely those technical skills, but also a lot of people skills. So you do need to talk to a lot of people. You need to talk to a lot of people both in a technical manner and a non-technical manner, because you also have to communicate back to your business teams. And I would say just good organizational thinking too. It's really important to be organized in my role. Otherwise, you can very easily lose track of all of the different projects going on and what state they're in, and lose track of a delivery timeline. So being organized, I would say. And Delapo, I actually forgot to ask you this question when we were talking about it, but what makes someone a good software developer?
I would say, I thought you were going to ask me the manager question. I would say being both coachable and approachable. So one of the things that I learned really early on, actually through my internships, was a rule of thumb is, for me at least, if I'm working on a problem for more than 4 hours and I'm stuck, I'm just gonna go ahead and ask somebody who's, more senior than I am, or who has more like knowledge on the topic. And being coachable when they are like teaching you, how to address this in the future, and retaining that information, so important, because, it's a good use of your time and also their time if they can coach you and teach you something new. And, the next couple of times over, eventually they don't need to do that anymore, and you can pass that knowledge down. But also on the reverse side, being approachable, right? So you don't want to be that engineer that no one can go to for help. You don't want to be that engineer that no one can come talk to. It really is a collaborative effort. And so in the same way that, when I'm stuck and I need help, I can approach my teammates because like they're approachable. I also need to make sure that I too am approachable when there's something I can offer to them.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to note that none of us said write really good code, right? Because, I think writing good code is probably a prerequisite to being in any of these roles, but also, that's something that you can continue to grow at. And I would think of programming or coding or whatever, languages, whatever tools, those are all tools in your toolbox. They're not actually what makes you good at your job. So I do want to talk just a little bit about, the other skills, the soft skills, let's call them, that go into this job that are beyond knowing how to get past a technical interview, knowing how to write good code, knowing how to write clean code. What do you expect from someone on the job? I know, Delapo, you were talking about being approachable and coachable, and that's a great answer to this question as well. But let's talk a little bit more about, what do you need to be good at, or what do you need to do on your job that is not coding related? And Eva, I'll ask you this question. What do you expect from your team?
Yeah, I love the being coachable and approachable. I love that, and I'm going to start using that. Thank you. It's
No
great.
way.
Yeah, some people think that being coachable is a sign of weakness. Like you don't know something and you go and ask for help is a sign of weakness. That's the opposite, right? As a sign of strength. You have this, what we call the growth mindset, right? So in terms of soft skills, I think knowing how to listen and how to take feedback is very, very important, especially for people working in the technical domain, like software engineers. Some of us tend to have, well, most of us or all of us are very smart people. And sometimes you tend to think you're smarter than you are, right? And then you don't want to listen to others when somebody criticizes your design or has feedback on your code. That's not good. So I would expect and encourage people, be ready to listen. There is always something you can learn, right? From your peers, from your colleagues. And on the other side of that, be ready to give critical feedback as well. As you see something wrong, speak out, right? Because you are, it's not an individual piece of work that builds a product. It's the collective, right? So if you're building a project, a software project, there is going to be multiple hands working on it. So if you see something wrong, speak up. Of course, positive criticism, right? So we expect that two-way conversation to happen on the technical discussion. So that's the kind of soft skill. So don't take it personally. Somebody criticizes your work. Try to learn from that.
Absolutely. That's really great advice. And I love that you said be ready to be critical in a productive way as well. I think my advice would be to trust yourself. I think a lot of people, especially when they're just starting out as software developers, they have a large deal of imposter syndrome about their own technical skills and, the ideas that they have. But the people that I see that do the best and have that growth mindset kind of get past that a little bit and decide to trust themselves and trust their own opinions and really put them out there. So I would say, especially when you're just starting out, obviously absorb as much as possible, learn as much as possible, and be coachable. But also, you do need to trust yourself and trust that you're in this position for a reason, and it's because they hired you to do the job, and they think you can do it. So, yeah, definitely don't be afraid to speak up in those situations. So we're going to turn it over to audience questions here in a little bit, but I want to ask one final question to to each of you, and that is, do you have one piece of advice for if you had to take someone from point A, which is I don't know anything about code, to all the way to I'm working as a software developer at a tech company? What one piece of advice do you want to leave them with? And Dolapo, we'll start with you.
I feel like there's all the standard ones that apply about like just honing your craft. So I would just say learn how to read and document your code. It's such an underrated skill, knowing how to read code, but even more underrated, knowing how to document your code very well and talk about your code like concisely. So that's it.
Definitely. And yeah, reading code is a much bigger part of this job than you might think it is.
Yes.
Evo, how about you?
So I would say for somebody just starting, I would say set some goals for your career. Think about yourself. Where do you want to be maybe in 5 years from now? Maybe in 10 years. Maybe 10 years is too far. But set a goal and then build a plan and then go for it and study. Be methodical about learning the fundamentals. We talked a lot about that. I think this advice about learning how to read code and document code is also great. And then try to build experiences as you grow in your career, be it in school, be it through internships. I like to say that the internships I did, the two of them were turning points in my career. So that's important because that's the opportunity to build your network as well, right? So so make a plan and then try to get advice from people you know that maybe are in the same field and are more senior. I'm sure you're going to get good learnings from them.
Absolutely. And I think I'll leave you with one last piece of advice from my end, which is just write as much code as humanly possible when you're doing this, because if I look at code that I wrote 5 years ago or even a year ago, it is garbage compared to what I would write now. So you really refine your skill the more you write code. And I know a lot of people spend a lot of time like watching videos or reading books or whatever it is, thinking that they are absorbing that information and that they are learning, but they don't actually practice it. So practice, and just write a lot of code. So we're going to transition now to some questions from the audience, and these are from our chat. So if you have any questions, please do ask them in the chat. So here's a question for you here's a great question from Simone. What's the difference between a software engineer and a software developer? That's a great question because we've been kind of using them interchangeably here.
To me, it's the same. It's just terminology. Yeah. I mean, I haven't never thought about that. Usually we have those terminology questions. What's the difference between machine learning and AI? Is a very common one that I get. But between a software developer and a software engineer, I don't think there. I wouldn't say that, at least for us, there's no difference. Dolapo, do you agree? Or
Yeah, so I was going to say there is a slight difference in my opinion. I think engineers are closer to architects in my mind. Like when I think of like engineering code, I'm really thinking about like the entire like, software design, architecture, infrastructure, like, and then developing is just, oh, I'm just writing code. And then, for those who might want to know, and then being a computer scientist, I think is more on the academic side and more on the theory side. And those are like my distinctions.
Yeah, I generally agree. If you're looking at job postings, I think they're pretty much interchangeable. But there is probably a difference between like a web development course versus a software engineering course, in which one is going to be more about actually building the thing and one is going to be more about like the underlying, what's happening on the computer level. So I guess, if you're looking at job titles, no distinction.
Yeah.
Here's a great question. This one is from Rahul, and he says, hello, I'm 18 and I have one question for you. If you had a do-over and if you were 18 again, what is one thing you would change in terms of your career or schooling? While you guys are thinking, I had one ready for this, so I'll start. I think the thing that I would change is that I would focus a little bit more on trying to find what I liked doing as opposed to what I thought I should be doing. And what I mean by that is, I don't think I would have changed what my degree was in or what I learned, but I didn't understand that you could find your passion not just in what you do, but in what you work on. And I found my passion is working in the education space, and I still do it in a technical capacity, but this is the space I want to be in. And I wish I had spent a little bit more time early on in my school and in my career thinking about, what space do you want to work in and what are you passionate about in that way?
Okay, so mine was going to be the opposite of yours. Wow, that's so interesting. So when I was in school, and even now, right, my focus has been more so on the computational linguistics side, but I don't work on that at work. I work on a security solution, and I wish like I would not have pigeonholed myself so much. I mean, I didn't pigeonhole myself too much, but I think because I enjoy so much of what I do now, and when I was in college and I was looking towards, a computer science linguistics PhD, I didn't really focus on what else was available. So, less pigeonholing on my side.
For sure. And yeah, good to hear different advice from different people. Not everything works for everyone. Eva, how about you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think looking back, the thing that if I look back between my academic studies and what I did in parallel, the thing that I really, really liked were my two internships, but I did them during the PhD, so kind of late in the career, and they were both at Microsoft Research, but they were eye-opening and game-changing. So I would probably try to do internships earlier. Not wait until I was in the PhD to try an industry internship. So yeah.
Absolutely. Here's a question from Shruti. Should we learn all the trending programming languages or just focus on one and master it? That's a good question.
Yeah. I think we all jump in to answer it. This one.
I think we all have very strong
Delapo, you go
opinions about
first.
this.
Okay, so I always recommend that engineers try to remain language agnostic. Every internship that I've had, I have learned a different, programming language on the job for that company. So I would actually recommend like finding one of like the more core languages. So like, I wouldn't say C because I don't want to deal with memory management, but I would say like a Java, a Python, C++, Ruby if you're feeling fancy. But one of the top 5 programming languages, and stick to that because use in the industry doesn't change much. And those top 5 languages will really give you like experience with different types of structures and different types of ways of like writing code. And yeah, I would stay away from the trendy languages. I stay away from the trendy languages.
Yeah, I agree. I would say try to focus on maybe 2, 3 with different characteristics, as we discussed it before. Maybe a C or C++ to get you more closer to how the computer works. So you have to learn memory management. Then go to a Java or C#, and then you practice more a higher level object orientation. You understand things like garbage collection, right? You could do very nice multi-threading with everything that the framework provides. And as I said, if you are into AI, data science, ML, Python is clearly today the language that you should go for. But try to mix that. Have that diversity, that bag of 2 or 3, rather than 10 or 20, or trying to learn a new one every month, right? Will probably help you develop this muscle, right, on software engineering.
Yeah. I definitely agree with both of you. And I would say one last thing I'll add to that is a lot of people think that they need to learn everything on a job description because a lot of job postings have like 20 different languages on them. I would say take that with a grain of salt. Most of the people writing the job descriptions are not technical people, so they don't necessarily know exactly what you need to know as a software developer. I would say if you know like 1 or 2 of the things on that list, you're probably good to apply for that job as long as it's at the right experience level. All right, so we have just about a minute left. So I'm going to ask you one final question, which is, what do I do to make my resume stand out amongst other applicants?
Keep it simple. Highlight the most important things first, and 1 page.
Yeah, I think Evo's given all the gems, but I'm gonna add one that I just for a little spice, if you want to. anytime I see someone that has, if they're familiar with Y86 assembly or any sort of like assembly, I always like give them an extra eye. So if you want to be a little bit spicy, you know, learn assembly language, and I will for sure have a chat with you.
That's great advice. So thank you all so much for attending this panel, and I hope we answered a lot of your questions. And I know that we had some people answering some more questions in chat, so thank you so much for participating. I do want to leave you with this final link. This is basically the link I discussed earlier of where you can go to find out more information on learning paths and certifications. And thank you so much for your attendance today.
Thank you.